The morning started like any other for her. The city streets were alive with the usual noise, cars honking, people hurrying to work, the occasional shout from a street vendor trying to sell something. She walked along the pavement, hands tucked in her coat pockets, eyes scanning the ground more than the world around her. Most people would pass her without a second thought. To them, she was just another face among thousands. A quiet figure moving through a bustling city with a rhythm. All her own, but invisible to the outside eye. She had always been like this, quiet, careful, almost invisible. Even as a child, she preferred corners and shadows. Not because she was afraid, but because she noticed things others didn't. She noticed how the wind bent the trees, how the sunlight struck the window in the morning, how the rhythm of footsteps could be almost musical if you listened carefully. That sensitivity made her different, and different had always been a lonely place to be. Her life was full of ordinary routines. Yet somehow, the ordinary had layers she alone could see. She worked at a small cafe downtown, where the smell of coffee mixed with the chatter of customers and the clatter of dishes. Most days, she served tables quietly, never engaging in more than polite conversation. The regulars had learned her name, but that was about it. No one asked about her life outside of work, and she never volunteered details. It was easier this way. Less expectation. Less chance of disappointment. But there was another side to her life, one that remained hidden from everyone. At home, when the city's noises faded and the walls of her small apartment seemed to breathe in rhythm with her own heartbeat, she would sit at the old upright piano that had been in her family for years. Her fingers would move over the keys with a confidence and grace that seemed impossible for someone so quiet, so unassuming. Music had always been her companion, her secret language, her way of telling the world who she was when words were never enough. People rarely knew this about her. Even her closest colleagues at the cafe assumed her world was small, limited to shifts, errands, and evenings spent quietly at home. They could not have imagined the depth of feeling she carried, or how effortlessly her hands could transform that feeling into music. They could not have imagined the hours she spent practicing, the notes memorized, the emotions woven into every melody she played. She never played for anyone but herself, so she thought. Today, however, was different. Today she had decided to do something she had never done before. Something small, maybe, but terrifying in its own way. The cafe had a small corner near the entrance where an old piano stood, one that was mostly ignored. Sometimes a customer would plunk a few notes on it while waiting, but it was generally considered a decorative piece, a relic of the past. Today, she decided she would play. The moment she touched the keys, a strange mix of fear and excitement surged through her. Her fingers hovered over the first notes, hesitant, almost shy. She could feel the eyes of passers-by on her even before they stopped to watch. Some smiled politely, some glanced quickly and moved on, and a few whispered to each other with a hint of amusement. She ignored them all. This was not about proving anything to anyone. It was about letting the music speak. It's about letting herself be seen in the only way she knew how. The first notes were soft, almost fragile, like a whisper. People stopped to listen, some out of curiosity, some out of surprise. They were not prepared for the depth that followed. Slowly, her confidence grew. She leaned into the piano, feeling every vibration under her fingertips, feeling the music spread through her chest and into the room. The melody carried memories. She hadn't even realized she was holding on to the quiet afternoons at home. The small victories over her own fears, the longing for connection that she had never expressed in words. Her eyes closed as she played, and the world around her seemed to fall away. The chatter of the cafe, the hum of traffic outside, even the faint smell of brewing coffee, all of it disappeared. There was only the piano, only the music, only the way it allowed her to breathe and exist fully in a way that the world never allowed otherwise. The notes were deliberate, yet free, flowing from her heart rather than her mind. Each one told a story, a fragment of her soul laid bare for anyone willing to hear. People began to gather, drawn by the unexpected beauty of her playing. At first it was just a handful of customers leaning against tables, curious. Then more came, forming a small circle around the piano. they whispered among themselves, unsure what to make of this quiet young woman who seemed so ordinary, yet was creating something extraordinary. Some frowned, skeptical, thinking it must be a trick or that she was exaggerating her skill. Others were silent, unsure how to react to something so pure and unpolished, yet profoundly moving. She noticed none of this. She was lost in the music, lost in a world that finally felt like it belonged to her alone. Each note was a heartbeat, a pulse of emotion that connected her to everyone in the room, whether they realized it or not. She felt the weight of years of quiet practice, of secret dreams, of unnoticed talent. She felt the tension of holding something inside for so long and finally letting it breathe. And then something remarkable happened. The music seemed to take on a life of its own. Her fingers moved faster, more confidently, the notes dancing and weaving through the air with a clarity and intensity that surprised even her. The crowd grew silent, mesmerized. People who had doubted her, who had assumed this would be a simple, forgettable moment, now stood transfixed. They watched as a hidden world revealed itself in the movement of her hands. In the rise and fall of her melodies, it was not just skill they were witnessing, it was emotion, raw and unfiltered. It was a story told without words, yet understood by everyone present. Some felt tears prick their eyes. Others felt a lump in their throat they could not explain. A few older patrons nodded slowly, as if recognizing a talent they had not seen in years. The young woman played on, unaware of the growing astonishment, unaware that this moment was about to change everything. For the first time, she realized that the music she had always thought was private, personal, and hidden, could touch others in ways she had never imagined. She could see the effect it had, the way heads turned, the way people leaned closer, the way their expressions softened, changed, opened. It was a quiet revolution in that small corner of the cafe, and she was at its center. She finished the piece, her fingers lingering on the last notes, letting them fade into silence. The room remained quiet for a moment, as if no one could believe what had just happened. Then, slowly, almost hesitantly, applause began to build. At first, it was a smattering of claps, polite and tentative. Then it grew louder, more confident, until the entire room was clapping and cheering, some people even rising to their feet. She blinked, startled by the response, a flush rising to her cheeks. She had never imagined that playing could create such a reaction. People approached her, their faces alight with curiosity and admiration. "That was incredible," one said. "I had no idea you could play like that," another asked, almost breathless. "Have you been performing somewhere? Why haven't I seen you before?" She smiled softly, uncertain what to say. The truth was that she had been performing in her own way every day for years, just not for anyone who mattered. She had been invisible, and now the invisible had become undeniable. Her life had always been quiet, measured, cautious. She had believed that remaining unnoticed was safer, easier, less complicated. But as she looked around at the faces glowing with surprise and appreciation, she realized that there was a different kind of power in being seen, in sharing what was inside her. The piano had become a bridge, connecting her private world with the public one, creating a moment of shared understanding that words alone could never achieve. By the time she left the cafe that day, the streets outside felt different. The city seemed sharper, brighter, alive with possibilities she had never considered. People passed her on the street and glanced in her direction, some with recognition, some with curiosity, as though they could sense something in her had changed. She walked home with a lightness she hadn't felt in years, the echo of the applause still ringing in her ears. That night, she returned to her apartment and sat at her own piano, not because she needed to prove anything, but because she wanted to. She played slowly, deliberately, savoring the sound, the touch, the feeling of her fingers bringing life to the keys. She realized that this was only the beginning, that there were stories inside her that had yet to be told. That music could open doors she had never dared to knock on, and in that quiet, simple apartment, she smiled for the first time in a long time. She knew she had crossed a line, that something fundamental had shifted inside her. She had stepped out of invisibility, not with words, not with force, but with something far stronger: truth, emotion, and a gift she had kept hidden for too long. The world had not yet caught up with her, but she was ready. Ready to play, ready to be seen, ready to let the music speak in a way that no one could ignore. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a spark of hope, fragile but unshakable, that this was the start of something extraordinary. The next morning, she woke up with a strange mixture of excitement and anxiety. The memory of yesterday's performance lingered like a soft echo in her mind. She could still hear the notes in her head, the way the crowd had gone silent and then erupted into applause. It was surreal, almost unbelievable. For years, she had played in private, never daring to imagine that anyone would notice, and now it seemed like a small part of the world had finally seen her. Yet, there was a tension underneath the thrill. She wondered how people would react today. Would they remember her? Would they expect her to play again? The thought made her stomach twist with nerves. She had never sought attention, never wanted it. She had only wanted the music to exist, to be alive in her hands. But now, with a taste of recognition, she felt exposed. As if she had opened a door she was not entirely ready to cross. At the cafe, the atmosphere was different. The usual morning crowd had begun to gather, but there was a noticeable energy in the air. Whispers traveled quietly among the staff and customers. Some regulars spoke in hushed tones, casting glances toward the corner where the piano sat. It was clear that yesterday's performance had made an impression. A few new faces lingered near the entrance, as if they had heard something extraordinary and wanted to see it for themselves. She arrived and moved through the cafe quietly, carrying her coat and bag. The staff greeted her with polite smiles, some of them hesitant, unsure how to approach the topic. One of the baristas, a young woman with bright eyes and a cheerful tone, finally asked, "Are you going to play today?" She paused, a small, uncertain smile on her face. "Maybe," she said softly, avoiding direct eye contact. It was not that she didn't want to play, but the attention was new and unfamiliar. She had spent her life in the shadows, quietly practicing, quietly dreaming. Suddenly, the idea of performing in front of a crowd, even if small, felt heavy, almost like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. The piano stood silently in its corner, waiting. Its surface was worn, its keys slightly uneven, but to her it was beautiful. She approached it slowly, feeling the familiar texture under her fingers. The memories of yesterday came back, the music flowing from her hands. The surprise and awe in the eyes of the people around her, the clapping that had made her feel both proud and shy at the same time. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, grounding herself before deciding what to do next. Some customers had already noticed her, their curiosity piqued. They exchanged quiet glances and murmured to each other. A few younger people with cameras leaned casually against tables, as if expecting something worth recording. Others, older patrons, watched more skeptically, arms crossed, judging silently. They had all seen performers before, some better, some worse. But there was a subtle tension in the room, a sense that something different was about to happen. She began to play. At first the notes were soft, cautious, testing the space around her. She felt their eyes, their judgments, and the slightest tremor ran through her fingers. For a moment, doubt crept in, and she wondered if she had made a mistake. Perhaps the world wasn't ready for what she had to offer. Perhaps she was better off remaining invisible, hidden in the quiet corners of her life. But then, as her fingers moved over the keys, the doubt melted away. The music flowed naturally, effortlessly, as if it had been waiting all along for this moment. Each note carried a piece of her story, her quiet mornings, her solitary evenings, the long hours spent practicing without recognition, the longing to connect. She let herself feel everything, and in turn, the music became more alive, more urgent, more real. People began to stop talking. Conversations faltered mid-sentence, and eyes slowly turned toward her. The skepticism that had been in the air was replaced by curiosity. They were unsure what to expect, and that uncertainty made them pay closer attention. Her fingers moved faster now, weaving a melody that was at once gentle and strong, simple and intricate. It was a contradiction, just like her life, quiet yet full of complexity. Hidden yet revealing, ordinary yet extraordinary. A few people, shifted uncomfortably. They had not expected this. Some had assumed she would be average, that her playing would be casual or amateurish. The first few notes already shattered that assumption. They whispered among themselves, some with disbelief, some with admiration. One man muttered under his breath, "I did not expect that." "Not at all." Another woman shook her head, a smile spreading across her face despite herself. She did not look at them. Her eyes were closed, and her mind was elsewhere, somewhere between memory and imagination, between fear and courage. She remembered her mother, who had once told her that music could speak when words could not. She remembered her father, who had never understood her passion, but had quietly supported it. She remembered every lonely night spent practicing. Every day she had pushed herself to improve, every small victory no one had seen. And now, in this cafe, she felt all those moments converging into something powerful and undeniable. The music grew louder, stronger, more confident. The melody danced across the room, filling corners, reaching ears, touching hearts. People leaned closer, drawn by the sound, caught in the spell she had unwittingly cast. A young boy, perhaps 7 or 8, sat on the floor near the piano, eyes wide with wonder. His mother watched him, equally captivated. An older man by the window, who had seemed uninterested at first, now held his hand to his chest, as if the music had found a place deep inside him. She noticed the effect. Not consciously, not in a way that distracted her from the music, but she felt it, like a vibration through the floor. The energy of the room had changed. The air itself seemed heavier with attention, yet lighter with admiration. Every note she played resonated not just in her own heart, but in the hearts of those around her. For the first time, she realized that her music could do more than express her own feelings. It could touch others, connect people in ways she had never imagined. The whispers grew louder, though still quiet enough to be part of the background. People were talking to each other, trying to understand what they were witnessing. Some expressed doubt, asking if she had trained formally, if she had performed professionally before. Others were simply amazed, shaking their heads in silent acknowledgement of her skill. It was a mix of curiosity, admiration, and incredulity. A combination that made the moment electric with possibility. As she continued, she began to experiment. She added subtle variations, small flourishes, moments of silence that made the next note even more powerful. She felt free, unbound by expectation, unshackled by fear. The piano became not just an instrument, but an extension of herself, a voice she had hidden for too long. And in that voice, the room found a story it had not known it wanted to hear. Some people recorded videos secretly on their phones, unable to resist capturing something extraordinary. Others simply watched, preferring to absorb the moment fully, rather than risk losing the feeling in a digital translation. The young boy clapped softly, almost timidly, as if afraid to disturb the spell. The mother smiled, tears threatening to fall. Even the skeptics could not hide their fascination, their eyebrows raised in astonishment at the talent emerging before them. She played on, feeling an energy she had never experienced. It was not about applause, not about recognition, not about proving herself. It was about the music, about the connection, about the realization that her years of quiet dedication had a purpose beyond her own satisfaction. Each note carried meaning, each chord conveyed emotion, each pause breathed life into the story she had been telling silently for so long. Hours could have passed, though in reality, it was only minutes. The cafe was transformed. The regulars who had come for coffee found themselves in a shared experience. Strangers connected by the sound of a young woman expressing herself with a depth they had not expected. Even the staff were caught off guard, witnessing a side of their coworker they had never imagined, and feeling pride, surprise, and admiration all at once. When the piece finally ended, the room was silent for a heartbeat. People blinked, as if unsure how to transition back to ordinary life after experiencing something so extraordinary. Then slowly, the applause began. It was tentative at first, a few scattered claps, but it grew, stronger and more confident, until it filled the cafe like a wave. People rose from their seats, some cheering, others smiling in awe. She opened her eyes, looking around at the faces, and for the first time, She felt seen in a way that went beyond recognition. She felt understood, not just as a musician, but as a person. Some approached her afterward, speaking rapidly, asking questions, complimenting her skill, expressing disbelief. "Where did you learn to play like that?" one asked. "Have you performed anywhere else?" Another inquired. She smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and humility. She had no need to explain, no need to justify herself. The music had spoken, and that was enough. The connection had been made, silently, powerfully, and irrevocably. By the end of the day, she felt exhausted but exhilarated. She had crossed an invisible line, stepping from a life of quiet observation into one of visible expression. She knew this was only the beginning, that people's expectations, curiosity, and attention would continue to follow her. But for the first time, she also knew that she could handle it, that she could embrace the challenge and continue to let her music speak without fear. As she walked home that evening, the city felt different. The streets seemed fuller, brighter, alive in a way they had never been before. People passed her and looked up, some recognizing her from the cafe, some simply sensing the energy she carried. She felt a quiet thrill, a subtle confidence building inside her. The world had shifted, and she had shifted with it. At home, she returned to her piano, sitting down and letting her fingers wander across the keys. She played softly, reflecting on the day, savoring the memory of the audience's reactions, the surprise, the curiosity, the awe. She had touched lives, if only briefly, and in doing so, she had expanded her own. The music had always been part of her life, but now it had a new dimension. It could reach beyond herself. Beyond her apartment, beyond the quiet corners of her world, for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what might come next. Perhaps another cafe, another corner, another audience waiting unknowingly to be moved. Perhaps a performance somewhere bigger, somewhere more public. Perhaps recognition, perhaps opportunity, perhaps challenge. She did not know yet, and she did not need to. For now, she simply played, letting the music guide her, letting the connection remain alive, letting herself grow into the person she had always been waiting to become. The next few days passed in a blur for her. The city seemed different now, as if it had shifted just a little to accommodate her presence. People who had heard her play at the cafe whispered about it in small circles. Strangers occasionally paused on the street, glancing toward the cafe corner where she had revealed her music to the world. She felt a strange mix of pride and apprehension. Pride because she had finally shared what had always lived quietly inside her, and apprehension because attention brought expectations she had never wanted. She continued her routines, going to work, serving customers, keeping her head down as best she could. But everywhere she went, she felt eyes on her in subtle ways. It was not always obvious, but she sensed the curiosity, the quiet judgment, the unspoken comparisons. People expected something from her now, something more than before. Some looked hopeful, anticipating her next performance, while others seemed skeptical, as if they were waiting to see if yesterday had been a fluke. She felt both pressure and freedom, a strange tension that made her days feel heavier and lighter at the same time. At the cafe, the atmosphere was charged. Regulars talked quietly about her playing, comparing yesterday's performance to what might come today. Some baristas approached her, offering tentative smiles and words of encouragement. But she could tell there was uncertainty in their tone. They admired her talent, yes, but they also wondered how she would handle it if expectations grew. It was a strange kind of attention, one that felt heavy even when it was well-meaning. She found herself thinking about the people who had stopped to listen before. Some had been skeptical at first, some amazed, some confused. She could remember their expressions, the surprise, the disbelief, the admiration, the hesitation. She realized that when someone shows hidden talent, people do not know how to react immediately. Some are inspired, some are intimidated, some feel challenged. And she, who had lived quietly for so long, was suddenly at the center of all these reactions. The cafe was unusually busy that morning. A few new faces lingered near the piano, clearly curious. A small crowd formed as the day went on, with people whispering, pointing subtly, or craning their necks to watch her. Some older patrons frowned, skeptical that someone so young and quiet could produce music so rich and commanding. They had seen performers before, and they had standards, whether conscious or not. Others simply watched, unsure what to expect, her expressions a mix of curiosity and polite restraint. She felt the weight of their eyes, but she also felt a strange energy in the room. The piano called to her as it always did, and she approached it slowly, letting her fingers brush the keys lightly. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to begin. And when she did, the first few notes were soft, testing the waters, hesitant yet precise. She felt the tension, but she did not let it control her. The music was hers first, theirs second. She played for herself, knowing that if she could lose herself in it, others would follow. As the melody unfolded, the reactions in the room began to shift. Conversations died down, whispers faded, and attention focused entirely on her and the piano. Her fingers moved with confidence now, weaving patterns that rose and fell like waves. The room seemed to bend around the music, the ordinary sounds of cups clinking and coffee brewing fading into the background. She was no longer just a waitress or a quiet young woman. She was a storyteller, a conduit for emotion, a presence that could capture the attention of anyone who listened. Some of the regulars watched skeptically at first, arms crossed, lips pressed together. They had expected something average, something pleasant but forgettable. They were not prepared for the depth, the skill, the emotion that poured from her fingers. Slowly, their skepticism began to fade, replaced by genuine surprise. A few even leaned forward, as if wanting to catch every nuance, every subtle change in tone. They could not believe someone so unassuming could create such a rich, commanding sound. The whispers of doubt were still there in some corners of the cafe. A few younger people exchanged skeptical glances, questioning whether her performance was as remarkable as it seemed. Some older patrons muttered under their breath, comparing her skill to what they had seen in professional settings. But the energy in the room was undeniable, a magnetic force that drew attention and demanded respect. The music carried something beyond skill, it carried truth, its authenticity, and years of quiet dedication that no one could fake. She felt it in herself as well. Every note resonated, not just in the room, but in her own heart. The music carried memories of evenings spent alone at her piano, of moments when she had doubted herself, of small victories that no one else had witnessed. It carried her hopes, her fears, her longing to connect, and her desire to be understood. She poured it all into the performance, letting the piano speak when words could not. People were drawn in, unable to look away. A mother held her child a little closer, sensing the emotion in the music. A young man leaned forward, elbows on the table, captivated by the subtle changes in tempo and tone. A group of office workers who had wandered in for coffee paused mid-conversation. Realizing that this was not ordinary background music, it was something alive, something meaningful. Even those who had approached skeptically could not deny it. They were being moved, whether they wanted to admit it or not. She experimented with dynamics, letting some notes linger, others dance lightly across the keys. She played with silence as much as with sound, understanding that pauses could speak as loudly as the music itself. The room responded almost instinctively, leaning in, shifting closer, opening to the story that unfolded before them. It was not just music. It was connection. She could feel it. A subtle vibration that ran through the floor, into the walls, and into the people around her. Some recorded the performance secretly on their phones, eager to capture a moment they knew was rare. Others simply watched, preferring to experience it fully rather than risk losing something in translation. Children sat quietly, parents held their breath, strangers exchanged glances of shared recognition. It was a moment of collective wonder. A brief suspension of reality where nothing else mattered except the sound flowing from the piano and the presence of the person creating it. She noticed small gestures, an older man closing his eyes, a woman leaning slightly forward, a young boy tapping his foot softly. Each response, each subtle reaction, reinforced something she had always known but had never fully believed. that music could reach people in ways nothing else could. She had hidden this power for so long, uncertain if it mattered, uncertain if it could ever be appreciated. Now, she saw that it did, that it could, that it had. The piece she played built, gradually rising in intensity, without losing its delicate touch. It was intricate but not showy, emotional but not forced. She allowed herself to feel every note, to embrace the vulnerability that came with revealing something deeply personal to the world. And as she played, she realized that the music had become a conversation, a dialogue between herself and the audience, between her private life and the public space she occupied, between the unseen and the seen. Some people gasped softly at unexpected flourishes. Others nodded in quiet approval, and a few simply sat in awe, unsure how to respond except to listen. She felt the spectrum of reactions, the full range of human emotion in the room, and it fueled her performance even further. Every note carried more than sound. It carried meaning, intention, and connection. The cafe, once a mundane place of coffee and chatter, had transformed into a space of shared experience and quiet revelation. Her mind drifted to memories of her childhood when she had first touched a piano. She remembered her fingers struggling to find the right notes, the frustration of mistakes, and the joy of small successes. She remembered the nights she had cried silently because she felt no one understood her love for music. No one could hear what she could hear. And now, decades later, in a small cafe with a handful of people, those same feelings had come full circle. The music had spoken what words could not. People had listened. When she reached the end of the piece, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then, slowly, applause began. At first, it was tentative, polite, almost reluctant. But it grew quickly, louder, more confident, until the entire cafe seemed to vibrate with the sound. She opened her eyes, looking around at the faces, and saw genuine admiration, surprise, and even awe. People were clapping, some standing, some smiling, some shaking their heads in disbelief. She felt a warmth rising in her chest, a mixture of pride, relief, and humility. Afterward, several people approached her, eager to speak, to compliment, to understand. "I didn't know someone could play like that," one woman said. "You are incredible," another asked. "Have you performed somewhere else? Why have we never seen this before?" She smiled softly, unsure what to say. She had no professional experience. She had never sought the spotlight. Her music had always been private, intimate, personal. And now it had found an audience, and that was enough. The reactions stayed with her long after she left the cafe. She walked home slowly, letting the city sounds wash over her, reflecting on the day and what it had meant. She realized that she had stepped into a new space, one where her talent could no longer be hidden, where people would see her differently, and where she had to navigate attention, expectation, and opportunity. It was both thrilling and intimidating, but she felt ready. That night, she sat at her piano at home and played again, not for anyone else, but for herself. She reflected on the reactions, the whispers, the skepticism, the admiration. She let the music carry her through memories, emotions, and possibilities she had never dared imagine. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new eyes watching, new judgments, but she also knew something fundamental had changed. She had crossed a line, revealed a hidden part of herself, and discovered that it mattered, that it could move people, and that she could handle the attention with grace and confidence. The day began with an unusual sense of anticipation. She felt it as soon as she stepped out of her apartment. The city seemed alive in a different way. Every sound, every movement, every glance carried a subtle energy. She tried to shake off the tension, telling herself it was just her imagination that the city had always moved like this. But deep down, she knew things were different now. Yesterday's performance had left a ripple, a quiet stir that she could feel lingering in the air. People were talking about her, wondering what she would do next, curious to see if she could do it again. At the cafe, the atmosphere was unmistakable. A crowd had already begun to form, people lingering near the entrance, whispering to one another, casting quick glances at the corner where the piano stood. Some had come specifically to see her play again. Others had wandered in, drawn by word of mouth. Even the regulars, who had been indifferent or polite observers before, now leaned in, eager to witness something extraordinary. There was an unspoken tension, a mix of expectation and curiosity, that made the air feel heavier than usual. She entered quietly, carrying her bag and coat, trying to act as if it was any other day. But the moment she walked past the cluster of people near the piano, she felt their eyes on her. There were whispers, some admiring, some doubtful, and a few skeptical comments that she could sense even without hearing them clearly. "Is she really going to do it again?" one woman murmured to her companion. "Can she possibly top yesterday?" another voice said. The uncertainty, the low expectations, the doubt, it all hung in the air like a challenge. She set her bag down and approached the piano. The worn keys seemed to call to her, familiar and comforting. She paused, letting her fingers hover above them. Her heart raced slightly, a mixture of nerves and excitement. She had played before, in private, and even yesterday in public. But today felt different. Today, people were not just watching, they were judging, waiting for her to either prove herself or fall short. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reminded herself why she was here. The music was hers first, theirs second. When she began to play, the first notes were soft, careful, almost tentative. She let them linger, feeling the room respond. People stopped their conversations, turned their heads, and focused on her. She noticed skeptical faces, some frowning, others whispering doubts. She did not let it disturb her. She let the music grow organically, letting her fingers find the rhythm, the emotion, the story within each note. Slowly, confidence returned, and the melody began to flow more freely. The audience shifted as she played. Some leaned forward, intrigued by the unexpected depth. Others whispered to each other, comparing the skill they were witnessing to what they had imagined. A few older patrons shook their heads, amazed that someone so quiet, so unassuming, could produce such complex and emotive music. Even those who had doubted her were now captivated, their skepticism slowly giving way to admiration. The piano filled the room, not just with sound, but with emotion, with stories, with the quiet power of someone revealing herself fully to the world. She allowed herself to feel the music, to let it carry her through memories of long nights practicing alone, of hours spent perfecting each note, of moments when she had doubted herself and yet persisted. Each chord was infused with her own journey, each pause a reflection of patience, each crescendo a release of emotion that had been hidden for years. The room was transformed, no longer a simple cafe, but a place where hearts and minds were connected by sound and feeling. The crowd grew steadily. People who had come out of curiosity stayed, drawn by the unfolding melody. A few recorded on their phones, hoping to capture the moment, but most simply listened, unwilling to break the fragile spell. A young girl clutched her mother's hand, wide-eyed, silently absorbing every note. A man by the window tilted his head, closing his eyes, allowing the music to move through him. Even those who had been dismissive or doubtful could not look away. The performance was too real, too emotional, too human to ignore. As the piece progressed, she began to push herself further. Her fingers danced over the keys, exploring dynamics, shifting tempos, weaving soft passages with powerful chords. She experimented with silence as much as sound, allowing pauses to speak as loudly as notes. Each moment carried intention. Each melody was carefully crafted, yet natural, reflecting a depth of experience and emotion that no one could fake. The audience was spellbound, caught in the tide of her music, unsure how to respond, but unwilling to leave. Some of the onlookers whispered among themselves, expressing disbelief. "I didn't expect this at all," one said softly. "She's amazing," another admitted, shaking their head. Some compared her to professional performers. Others marveled at the raw talent they were witnessing. There was a growing sense of excitement, collective realization that this was not just a casual performance, but a moment of genuine artistry. People were not only impressed, they were moved. She felt the connection. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. Every chord she played seemed to resonate in the hearts of those listening. She felt the energy of the room, the way attention shifted and focused entirely on her. Quiet awe, the surprise, the admiration. It was not something she had sought, not something she had expected, but it was undeniable. Her music had the power to reach beyond herself, to touch others, to create a shared experience that was rare and precious. The piece reached a climax, a moment of intensity and vulnerability. Her fingers moved with speed and precision, yet with sensitivity, balancing technical skill with emotion. The room seemed to hold its breath, captivated by the unfolding narrative and sound. Some listeners leaned forward involuntarily. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The skeptics were silent now, caught off guard by the depth, the control, and the authenticity of her performance. She allowed herself a small smile as she played, realizing that this was not just a test for the audience, it was a test for her. She had always wondered if she could reach people, if her private world could be shared, if her music could resonate beyond her own heart. Now she knew it could, and the realization brought both exhilaration and calm. She felt alive in a way she had never experienced, fully present, fully herself, and fully connected to the people around her. The finale approached. A delicate balance of power and grace. She softened some notes, letting them linger, while others rang out boldly, filling the room with emotion. Every movement of her hands, every subtle shift in tone, was deliberate yet instinctive, a reflection of years of practice and innate talent. The audience was completely absorbed, some whispering words of praise, others simply sitting in awe. The music carried a story they had not expected, one that transcended age, background, and expectation. When she finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat, as if no one could believe what had just happened. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first, tentative, polite, almost unsure, but it grew quickly, louder, more confident, until it filled the cafe. People stood, clapping, cheering, some even shouting words of admiration. She blinked, overwhelmed by the response, her heart racing. For years she had played in private, never seeking recognition, never imagining such a reaction. And now it had come, sudden and overwhelming. People approached her afterward, eager to speak, to compliment, to understand. Some asked if she had formal training. Others expressed disbelief that someone so young could play with such depth and emotion. She smiled softly, her cheeks flushed, unsure what to say. She had always played for herself, her music a private refuge, a secret world. Now that world had spilled into the public, and the effect was far greater than she had imagined. Even the skeptics approached, curiosity replacing doubt. One older man, who had been particularly reserved, shook his head and said, "I didn't think someone could do that." "You have a gift," another woman, almost in awe, added. "I don't even know what to say." "That was incredible," she nodded, still soft-spoken, letting the music speak for her. Words were insufficient. Her performance had conveyed everything she felt, and everyone had understood it in their own way. By the time she left the cafe, the city had a different energy. People glanced at her with recognition, curiosity, and admiration. She walked home slowly, letting the sounds of the city settle over her, reflecting on the experience. She realized that she had stepped into a new space, one where her talent could no longer be hidden, where attention and expectation would follow her, and where she had to navigate not only public reaction but her own emotions. That night, she returned to her own piano at home. She played again, slowly, deliberately, savoring each note, reflecting on the reactions, applause, and the wonder she had seen in people's faces. She felt a quiet confidence growing inside her, a recognition that she could face the world with her music, that she could share what she had always hidden, and that people could receive it with understanding and appreciation. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a bridge, a way to connect, to express, to reveal herself in ways words never could. She knew the days ahead would bring new challenges, new expectations, and perhaps even criticism. But she also knew something vital. Her music mattered, and she mattered through it. The fear and hesitation she had felt before were giving way to courage and purpose. She had shown the world a part of herself, and it had responded. That knowledge was powerful, affirming, quietly transforming. For the first time in her life, she felt fully visible, fully alive, and fully capable of embracing what came next. And as she played through the night, letting the music fill her apartment and her heart, she understood that this was only the beginning, a step into a larger, brighter, and more challenging world where her talent could shine, inspire, and change lives. The days that followed were a whirlwind, yet somehow they felt slow and deliberate all at once. Word of her talent had begun to spread beyond the cafe. Carried by whispers, shared stories, and short video clips posted online. At first, it was only a handful of people talking, friends telling friends, neighbors mentioning it to colleagues, but soon the ripple became a wave. She could feel it in the way people watched her more closely, in the way the baristas at the cafe asked her quietly if she planned to play again, in the way strangers paused near the corner where the piano sat, hoping to catch a glimpse of the quiet young woman who could make music speak so clearly. She tried to remain calm, moving through her routines as best she could. The workday at the cafe was still busy, still full of orders, customers, and the ordinary noise of daily life. But now, even the familiar rhythm of plates and cups felt different. Every sound was slightly heightened, sharper, as though the world itself had become more aware of her presence. She noticed the glances of regulars who had previously paid her little attention, the subtle interest in people who had not known her at all, and the way even the skeptical ones seemed to reconsider their first impressions. It was strange, surreal, and, in some ways, exhilarating, despite the attention. She remained herself, quiet, deliberate, careful. She did not seek recognition, though it seemed to find her wherever she went. Her music, which had once been her private refuge, had become a bridge to the world, connecting her to people who might never have noticed her otherwise. And yet, there were moments of doubt, tiny cracks of fear that crept in when she least expected them. Could she live up to the growing attention? Could she maintain the authenticity and depth that had made her performances so compelling? The questions lingered at the edges of her mind, unspoken but persistent.